Have you ever had a really bad day? Maybe you spilled your morning coffee, missed the bus, and then realized you were wearing your shirt inside out. Well, I want you to take that feeling and multiply it by, about a gazillion. Now imagine that bad day lasts for thousands of years and affects every single living thing on the entire planet. That, my friends, is what we call the Permian Triassic Extinction event. It was Earth's ultimate bad day, a planetary-scale disaster movie where almost everyone was written out of the script. This wasn't just a bump in the road. It was a complete and total system crash, making the asteroid that took out the dinosaurs look like a minor fender bender in comparison. It was the day the music died, and the entire orchestra went with it. We call this event the Great Dying, and that's not just a dramatic nickname for a rock band. It's a chillingly accurate description of what happened about 252 million years ago. Imagine Earth throwing a massive party, and then a series of unfortunate events. The cosmic equivalent of the DJ tripping over the power cord, the catering catching fire, and a volcano erupting in the living room all at once, brought the whole thing to a screeching, fiery halt. It was the biggest, baddest, most thorough extinction event in our planet's 4.5 billion year history. Life on Earth came so close to being completely wiped out that it was like watching a movie hero's health bar flash red with just 1 pixel of life left. This wasn't a quick and clean apocalypse like you see in the movies. There was no single giant explosion followed by a cool one-liner. Instead, this was a slow, agonizing process. It was a multi-stage catastrophe that unfolded over tens of thousands of years, a relentless grind that systematically dismantled the world's ecosystems piece by agonizing piece. It was less like a sudden gunshot and more like a slow-motion train wreck that just kept going and going. The planet was essentially being cooked from the inside out, and the guest list for life on Earth was about to get drastically, permanently shorter. It was a global reset button that nobody asked for. So buckle up, science fans. We're about to take a journey back in time to witness the most dramatic plot twist in the history of life. We'll explore what caused this planetary catastrophe, who the unlucky victims were, and how the few, the brave, the incredibly fortunate survivors managed to cling to life on a world that was actively trying to erase them. It's a story of fire, poison gas, and acid rain. It's a tale of incredible destruction but also of incredible resilience. It's the ultimate survival story, and it holds some pretty important lessons for us today. Consider this your front row seat to the greatest show of death on Earth. Before the universe decided to hit the reset button, the world was a very different place. This was the Permian period, the final chapter of the Paleozoic era. All the world's continents were smashed together into one giant supercontinent called Pangaea, which looked a bit like a giant Pac-Man on a world map. This meant you could technically walk from modern-day Siberia to Antarctica, though you'd probably want to pack a lot of snacks. The climate was generally warmer and drier than today's, especially in the vast interior of this mega landmass. Life had been evolving for billions of years and had gotten pretty creative, filling every corner of the land and sea with some truly spectacular creatures. In the oceans, life was thriving. Coral reefs, though built by different organisms than today, were bustling underwater cities. The seas were full of trilobites, those armored pill-bug-like critters that had been scuttling around for over 250 million years. They were the original old-timers of the sea. There were also giant sea scorpions, some as long as a person, and ammonites with their beautiful spiral shells, jet-propelling their way through the water. It was a vibrant, complex marine world, a finely tuned engine of biodiversity that had been running smoothly for eons. The oceans were the planet's cradle of life, and they were packed to the brim with an incredible variety of species. On land, things were just as interesting, if not a bit weirder. This was not the age of dinosaurs. They hadn't shown up to the party yet. Instead, the dominant land animals were our very own distant cousins, the synapsids. These creatures, which include the famous Dimetrodon with its giant sail-like fin on its back, were more closely related to us mammals than to reptiles. They were the top dogs of the Permian. Alongside them were all sorts of other strange reptiles and amphibians, like the lumbering armored Scutosaurus, which looked like a walking coffee table with a tiny head. The world was covered in forests of ferns, conifers, and other ancient plants that formed the foundation for these complex terrestrial food webs. Life in the late Permian was, for all intents and purposes, at a peak. The ecosystems were mature, stable, and incredibly diverse. It was a world in balance, a complex tapestry woven from millions of years of evolution. The players were all on the stage, the sets were built, and the story of life was proceeding as planned. No one and no thing could have predicted the planetary curtain call that was about to take place. The world was a lush, sprawling, and sometimes bizarre paradise. But paradise, as we are about to see, was about to get a major, and I mean major, renovation. With fire. So, what kind of supervillain could possibly cause this much trouble? Was it a Death Star, a cosmic plague, an angry space wizard? The real culprit was something much closer to home, and far more insidious. The prime suspect in this planetary whodunit is a gigantic volcanic event known as the Siberian Traps. Now, when I say volcanic event, I don't mean a single mountain like Mount St. Helens having a bad day. I mean a vast region in modern-day Siberia, an area larger than Western Europe, started oozing and exploding lava continuously for something like 1,000,000 years. This wasn't just an eruption, it was a planetary wound that refused to stop bleeding magma. This colossal outpouring of lava was just the beginning of the problem. It was the side effects that really did the dirty work. Think of it like this. The lava itself was the distraction, while the real weapons of mass destruction were the gases released into the atmosphere. The volcanoes pumped out truly staggering amounts of carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas. This led to runaway global warming, causing planetary temperatures to skyrocket. It was as if someone had cranked the planet's thermostat all the way up and then broken the knob off. The world got hot, fast. And as we know, rapid climate change is never good for business if your business is, staying alive. But wait, there's more. It wasn't just CO2. The eruptions also released other nasty chemicals. As the magma burned through huge underground deposits of coal and organic matter, it belched out methane, another greenhouse gas that's even more potent than CO2. It was like throwing gasoline on a fire that was already a global inferno. On top of that, there were sulfurous gases that mixed with atmospheric water to create acid rain. This acid rain would have been strong enough to strip leaves from plants and poison soils and freshwater sources. The planet wasn't just getting a fever, it was being doused in poison from the sky. It was a multi-pronged attack on the very chemistry of life. The final nail in the coffin was what happened in the oceans. As all that CO2 from the volcanoes dissolved into the seawater, it made the oceans more acidic. This is a huge problem for any creature that builds a shell or a skeleton out of calcium carbonate, like corals, plankton, and mollusks. The acidic water literally started to dissolve them. The warming ocean water also lost its ability to hold dissolved oxygen, creating vast dead zones where most marine life suffocated. So you had a planet that was too hot, with poisoned air, acid rain, and suffocating acidic oceans. It was a perfect storm of awfulness, a cascade of calamities that created a truly unlivable world. When all these factors combined, the result was a worldwide biological meltdown. The Great Dying wasn't a single swift event but a 1-2 punch that devastated life first in the oceans and then on land. The first phase of the extinction seems to have hit the marine world the hardest. As the oceans became warmer, more acidic, and starved of oxygen, entire ecosystems collapsed from the bottom up. The tiny plankton that formed the base of the food web died off, and with them went everything that relied on them. It was like a Jenga tower, where someone pulled out all the bottom blocks at once. The whole beautiful, complex structure came crashing down in an instant. Imagine the world's reefs, once teeming with life, dissolving into gray sludge. Picture schools of fish gasping for oxygen in the warm, stagnant water, and ancient creatures like the trilobites, which had survived everything the planet had thrown at them for hundreds of millions of years, finally meeting their end. The oceans became a toxic, suffocating soup. Scientists have found rock layers from this time that are black and full of pyrite, or fool's gold, a sign of an oxygen-free, sulfur-rich environment. It seems that in some parts of the ocean, a type of bacteria that produces toxic hydrogen sulfide gas thrived. This poison could have bubbled out of the seas and into the atmosphere, adding yet another lethal weapon to the killer cocktail. On land, the situation was just as grim. The relentless acid rain would have destroyed forests and other plant life, leading to catastrophic soil erosion. Without plant roots to hold it in place, soil would have washed into the rivers and oceans, choking them with sediment and making a bad situation even worse. The world's forests may have been replaced by vast fungal wastelands. Scientists have found a fungal spike in the fossil record from this time, a layer of rock unusually rich in fossilized fungal spores. This suggests that for a while, the dominant form of life on land was fungus, feasting on all the dead and dying plant matter. It was a world of rot. For the animals on land, it was a nightmare. Their food sources disappeared as the plants died out. The air was hot and thin on oxygen, and possibly laced with poison. The intense heat would have been especially hard on large animals, which have a harder time cooling down. The once mighty synapsids and other large Permian creatures found themselves in a world that was actively hostile to their existence. They were starving, suffocating, and baking all at the same time. This was not a quick, merciful end. It was a slow, brutal grind that pushed life to the very edge of total annihilation. It was, without a doubt, the worst time to be alive in Earth's history. Section 5, the guest list gets shorter. Who checked out and who survived? The Great Dying was, honestly, the most exclusive event in Earth's history, in the sense that, almost no one was invited to the after-party. The statistics are just staggering. Scientists estimate that up to 96% of all marine species went extinct. Let that sink in for a moment. Imagine going to the aquarium and seeing only a handful of the tanks with anything living in them. That was the reality. The trilobites, after their incredible 270 million year run, were gone forever. The giant sea scorpions vanished. The vast, intricate reef systems built by creatures called rugose and tabulate corals were completely wiped out. It took millions of years for anything resembling a coral reef to evolve again. On land, the devastation was, well, nearly as complete. Around 70% of all terrestrial vertebrate species disappeared. The great synapsid dynasties, including the famous Dimetrodon and its relatives, were decimated. While some of our distant mammal-like ancestors survived, most of the big dominant players were just removed from the board. The large, heavily built herbivores like Scutosaurus vanished. The fearsome Gorgonopsians, saber-toothed predators that were basically the T-Rexes of their day, were gone. The extinction was also devastating for insects. It's actually the only mass extinction event to significantly impact them. The world fell silent as the buzzing, crawling, and roaring of the Permian faded away. So, who were the lucky few who managed to get a golden ticket to the Triassic period? In general, the survivors were the creatures you might expect: the small, the adaptable, and the generalists. Creatures that could burrow, like the small, pig-like synapsid Lystrosaurus, did relatively well. By living in burrows, they could have escaped the worst of the heat and the toxic air. Lystrosaurus was so successful after the extinction that for a time, it made up about 95% of all land vertebrates on the planet. The world was basically a Lystrosaurus farm. It was a classic disaster opportunist, a creature that thrived when everything else failed. In the oceans, the survivors were often the species that could tolerate low oxygen and high acid conditions. Some clams and snails made it through. A few hardy fish managed to cling on. On land, alongside Lystrosaurus, some of the early archosaurs, the group that would eventually give rise to crocodiles, pterosaurs, and dinosaurs, survived. They were small and not very impressive at the time, but, the extinction had cleared the stage for them. It wiped out their competition, giving them the evolutionary opportunity of a lifetime. The meek, it turned out, were about to inherit the Earth, or at least what was left of it. The world after the Great Dying was a strange and empty place, honestly, kind of like a scene from a post-apocalyptic movie. Geologists call this period the disaster interval or the coal gap. For millions of years after the main extinction event, the planet was so messed up that certain types of rocks like coal just stopped forming. Coal is made from compressed plant matter and, well, there simply weren't enough forests or peat swamps to produce it. The world was just too hot, too dry, and way too unstable for lush ecosystems to re-establish themselves. The vibrant green world of the Permian had been replaced by a red, dusty, and largely barren landscape under a hazy, oppressive sky. And the oceans? They were equally eerie. They've been described as a stinking, stagnant pond. The clear, life-filled waters of the Permian were gone, replaced by murky seas dominated by bacteria and algae. For millions of years, there were no reefs. The seafloor was covered in a thick layer of microbial slime. Scientists call these microbialites, and they're a sign of a deeply sick ecosystem where more complex life has been completely shut down. The few animal survivors, like the hardy clams and snails, had to eke out a living in this hostile new world. The ocean food web had basically been reset to its most basic level, slime. The climate of the early Triassic was brutal. The global warming that started the extinction didn't just go away, temperatures remained incredibly high for millions of years. The tropics, an area around the equator, may have been lethally hot, with ocean surface temperatures reaching a horrifying 40 degrees Celsius, 104 degrees Fahrenheit. This would have made a vast swath of the planet essentially uninhabitable for most complex life. The world was, well, a planetary sauna with broken controls. The weird weather patterns, including massive mega-monsoons, would have caused cycles of extreme drought and torrential floods, which just further destabilized the struggling ecosystems. This new harsh world set the stage for a completely new cast of characters. The few survivors found themselves in a world of opportunity. With all the old rulers gone, there were countless empty ecological niches just waiting to be filled. This is why the aftermath of the Great Dying is so important. It wasn't just an ending, it was also a new beginning. The devastation cleared the way for the rise of a new dynasty of animals that would dominate the planet for the next 150 million years. The dinosaurs. Without the Permian Triassic extinction, our world might look very, very different today. The aftermath of a global catastrophe is always going to produce some weirdness, and the early Triassic was no exception. The world was full of strange survivors and bizarre evolutionary experiments. As we mentioned, the star of the post-apocalyptic show was Lystrosaurus. This creature was not a reptile but a type of synapsid called a dicynodont. It had a turtle-like beak and 2 tusks, and it probably ate tough plant material. Its barrel-chested body and powerful lungs may have helped it survive in the low-oxygen atmosphere. For a few million years, this one genus of animal was everywhere, a testament to the power of being a generalist in a world gone mad. Another strange consequence of the extinction was the Lilliput effect. This is a phenomenon where, after a mass extinction, surviving species tend to evolve to become smaller for a few million years. It makes sense. Smaller animals need less food and oxygen, reproduce faster, and can hide more easily. So, for a while, the world was populated by miniature versions of their ancestors. The few surviving species of fish, clams, and land animals were all tiny. It was as if the planet had put a shrink ray on all the survivors. Only after the planet began to stabilize did life start to size up again, eventually leading to giants like the dinosaurs. The weirdness extended to the plants as well. While most of the great Permian forest were wiped out, some hardy plants survived. One of them was a type of seed fern called Dicroidium, which came to dominate many of the recovering landscapes. But for a long time, the plant world was simplified and patchy. The complex, multi-layered forests of the Permian were replaced with low-lying scrublands and pioneer species that could handle the harsh conditions. It was a tough time to be a vegetarian, which is probably another reason why the tough-beaked Lystrosaurus did so well. It could eat the tough, scraggly plants that other herbivores couldn't. Perhaps one of the most surprising survivors were the archosaurs, or ruling reptiles. Before the extinction, they were a relatively minor group of small, lizard-like creatures living in the shadow of the great synapsids, but they proved to be incredibly resilient. They were better adapted to the hot, dry conditions of the Triassic world. This small group of survivors would go on an incredible evolutionary journey, eventually giving rise to crocodiles, pterosaurs, the flying reptiles, and most famously, the dinosaurs. The Great Dying handed them the keys to the kingdom, and they took full advantage of it, shaping the course of life for the entire Mesozoic era. It's easy to look back at the Great Dying as a piece of ancient, distant history. It happened 252 million years ago, long before humans or even dinosaurs. But the story of the Permian Triassic extinction holds a chillingly relevant message for us today. When you look at the causes of the Great Dying, massive releases of greenhouse gases, rapid global warming, ocean acidification, and widespread habitat destruction, it starts to sound a little familiar. It's like reading the script for a disaster movie sequel, and realizing we're living in the opening scenes. We are, in our own way, conducting a similar, albeit faster, planetary experiment. The Siberian traps released massive amounts of carbon dioxide from volcanic activity over hundreds of thousands of years. We, through the burning of fossil fuels, are releasing carbon dioxide into the atmosphere at a rate that is even faster. This is causing the planet to warm at an unprecedented speed, disrupting weather patterns and threatening ecosystems. We're seeing more extreme heat waves, droughts and floods, echoes of the chaotic climate of the early Triassic. The parallels are not perfect, of course, but they are close enough to be deeply concerning. We are the volcanoes now. The oceans are also showing worrying signs. Just as the Permian oceans became acidic, our oceans are absorbing so much carbon dioxide from the atmosphere that their chemistry is changing. This modern ocean acidification threatens coral reefs, shellfish, and the tiny plankton that form the base of the entire marine food web. We are already seeing bleaching events where coral reefs, the rainforests of the sea, turn white and die due to heat stress. Scientists are also tracking the expansion of dead zones in the ocean, areas with so little oxygen that most marine life cannot survive. It's the same deadly combination that wiped out 96% of marine life 252 million years ago. Now, this isn't meant to be all doom and gloom, it's a message of caution, not despair. The key difference between the Siberian traps and us is that we are aware of what we are doing. The volcanoes didn't know they were wrecking the planet. We do. We understand the science, we can see the effects, and we have the incredible power of innovation and cooperation to change course. The story of the Great Dying is the ultimate cautionary tale. It shows us what can happen when a planet's life support systems are pushed past their breaking point. It's a warning written in the rock record itself, a message from the deep past about how to protect our future. So, after all that fire, acid, and planetary sickness, what's the big takeaway? The Great Dying was, in essence, Earth's worst ever hangover. The planet went on a wild bender of volcanic activity, and the morning after lasted for millions of years. It was a miserable, head-pounding, I'm never doing that again kind of experience on a global scale. And the punchline to this cosmic joke? Life somehow survived. It was battered, bruised, and reduced to a shadow of its former self, but it didn't give up. It clung on in the cracks and crevices of a broken world, waiting for the fever to break. The story of the Great Dying teaches us that life is both incredibly fragile and astonishingly resilient. The complex, beautiful world of the Permian was built like a house of cards, and a massive geological event was able to knock it all down with frightening ease. It shows that the balance of our planet's systems, its climate, its oceans, its atmosphere, is a precious thing. Upset that balance too much and the consequences can be catastrophic. The planet itself will be fine, it will keep spinning. But the life that depends on those stable conditions might not be so lucky. It's a humbling lesson in just how dependent we are on our world's good health. But it's also a story of incredible hope and opportunity. Out of the greatest destruction came the greatest renewal. The extinction didn't just create losers, it created winners. It wiped the slate clean, allowing for new forms of life to emerge and radiate in ways that would have been impossible before. Without the Great Dying, there would have been no age of dinosaurs. And without the later extinction that wiped out the dinosaurs, there would have been no age of mammals, which means no primates and ultimately no humans writing essays about extinctions. In a very real and weird way, we owe our existence to these past catastrophes. So, the next time you're having a bad day, just remember the Permian Triassic Extinction. It's a reminder that things could be and have been a whole lot worse. But it's also a reminder that even after the worst day in the history of the world, life finds a way. The universe is full of plot twists. The Great Dying was the most dramatic one of all, and its ultimate lesson is one of respect for our planet and awe at the tenacity of life. It's a story written in stone, and it's one we should all take to heart, because understanding the past is the very best way to protect our future. Science, it's how we know.